Okay, so thank you so much, Maddie. As Maddie said, I learned to knit in Norway many years ago. And I have honed in the craft over many years. And I want to give a special shout out to Vesterheim because I actually learned how to knit Norwegian sweaters through a Vesterheim class many years ago. And it was Arnhild who used to teach Norwegian knitting sweater class at Vesterheim. And I took that class, I think, in 1998. So it was a long time ago, but that was really, I would say, instrumental in my bumping up to the next level of difficulty in my knitting journey. So thank you to Vesterheim for offering these fiber arts classes for folks like me who are really interested. Now I'm a teacher and instructor for Vesterheim, and so I also want to just express my deep appreciation for the opportunity to apply for this grant that supported the trip that I took to study Norwegian knitting and to go really deep with the craft. It was an amazing experience, and the presentation that I'm sharing with you today is really a sampler of that trip, both from the imagery as well as from sharing visits that I had along my journey. So you'll see me here. This is probably the most beautiful place I have ever picked up my knitting. And that was off the Lisa Fjord, and I'm there, and I'll share a little bit later with my cousin, extended cousin Narva, and just had this most incredible experience knitting outdoors with this beautiful view of the fjord. And the next image is kind of exemplary of Norwegian knitting too, because that's an image of hand-dyed yarn, hand-spun and hand-dyed yarn. And the person that dyed that yarn is actually the father, Gunnar, of the woman Åshild, who is a distant cousin who taught me how to knit. So very close personal connection to knitting, I will say, and that will come through in this presentation as well. So I'm a knitter, I'm an instructor, and I have very deep ties, both familial and through friendships in Norway, which made the trip even more meaningful for me. So next slide. So a little bit about me. Maddie already read introduction, but I just want to give a shout out to my mother. She's passed on. She passed in 2017. She's a proud Norwegian, and she passed that along to my siblings and I. I'm the youngest of four, and we're all very proud to have Norwegian American heritage. And I was able to travel to Norway with my mom 3 different occasions. And I have some dates there of when I traveled there. I actually got married in Norway. It was somewhat of an elopement, but both my spouse and I brought our parents along for that marriage. So it's a very special place for my husband and I, and consequently, a very special place for our 2 kids, Torsten and Lars. So I've been teaching for Vesterheim since 2021, and I look forward to continue to teach. And I hope that those of you who are listening, if you're interested, maybe you're well along on your knitting journey, or maybe you're just getting started, but please check out the fiber arts classes and Vesterheim offers, and hopefully maybe someday I'll get to meet you in one of my classes. Next slide. So I just wanted to give you a visual. These photos are taken from 1985 when I was there as a college student. I went to college at Luther College in Decorah, and between my junior and senior year, I traveled, and I lived in Norway for the summer. I worked on a farm, and just unbelievably so, I could have been placed anywhere in Norway, but the farm I was placed at was only 20 kilometers away from Udda, which is where my paternal family is from. And if you look at the far right-hand corner picture, that is Olaf Monsaker. He's a relative of mine. And he really paved the way that summer for me to connect with Åshild, who then taught me to knit. And we're similar age, and just really set off my trajectory of Norwegian knitting that summer when she taught me how to knit. I just want to point out the sweaters too. If you look at Olaf's sweater, just how beautiful that is. He's wearing it, he's a farmer, and he's wearing it with his overalls. And so another point about Norwegian knitting is the utility of it, the practicality of knitting. And the picture right below, that is Åshild and I and her little sister at a hytte. And the sweater I am wearing in that photo is a sweater that Åshild gave to me. And that also really ignited my interest. Like, I want to know how to do this. I want to know how to knit. But I was working on a farm that summer, so I picked cherries. So you see the picture of me in the tree. That's a typical cherry tree. And then all the cherries that were getting loaded onto the dock to be carried down the fjord to markets. It was a really amazing, amazing summer that I spent there, both in terms of exposure to knitting and nature and family. Next slide. And I got married. Just wanted to show you a few images here. And then the image of my family when my boys were little, the sweater that my husband is knitting, that I'm wearing, that my son is wearing. I knit those. I knit currently, just in the last 2 years. In the bottom left corner is my son Lars with the blue hat. I knit his sweater. And I knit the one for my son Torsten next to Lars. So it is to say that I've been knitting traditional Norwegian patterns for many, many years. And I just love to knit for my family, for my friends, and I love to teach. And so the images of the mittens are other items I've knit just within the last year. Next slide. So when I received the grant from Norway, or from Vesterheim, and thank you again for this opportunity, I had written up objectives for the experience. And one was just to read books about Norwegian knitting, just to get a further understanding and foundational knowledge. To research Norwegian knitting at textile and folk art museums. So I visited museums throughout my stay. I had the opportunity to interview some Norwegian knitters. I attended a 3-day knitting festival in Bergen. So it was there that I learned a tremendous amount and really inspired to hear the speakers there. They spoke in Norwegian, so of course my understanding of it was somewhat limited, but I've been able to do some translation from their slides to help me understand better what it was they were sharing. And then just touring the yarn factories to get a sense of Norwegian wool. Like, Norwegians are very, very proud of the fact that they have locally sourced wool. So it was to tour a factory to understand, well, what does that look like in Norway? And then part of the trip too was, as I traveled, to go to knitting stores and to go to husflidens and to engage with people who were working there, to ask them about contemporary scene in Norwegian knitting. And people were so gracious. They were so excited to know that I was there to learn. And I'd frequently bring up the museum, Vesterheim, to share that there was this very special museum in Iowa that's really supporting continued learning about culture and connections to Norway. So that was fun to share. Next slide. And here's my itinerary. I rented a car, which enabled me to have a lot of flexibility. And I also stayed with friends and family, which enabled me to extend my trip. I really appreciated the ability to spend time with family and friends, to stay at their hyttes, their houses. And so thank you to those individuals as well. And I'll recognize them toward the end of the slideshow, but it really made my trip very meaningful to have that opportunity. And I know a lot of you, if you've traveled, you know how special it is when you actually can spend time with people who live in the country where you're traveling, to share a meal and share stories, and for me in particular, knitting through my journey. So there's a light blue line, a highlighter, and I apologize, it's very light, but as you can see, I started in Oslo, went south. Oh, thank you for that arrow. I went south to Porsgrunn to spend a night with a friend, and then through Telemark, spending some time in Setesdal Valley. And then I made my way over to Western Norway, which is where my family is from. So it was a combination of seeing family and also visiting some museums and attending that festival in Bergen. and then made my way up north to Trondheim and then to Selbu, and spent a little time in Røros. And so I think it's more than 30 hours of driving, but that was my estimate. And the next slide kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what those travel sections, like how long I was traveling from point to point. And of course, I was driving a car. I went through many, many tunnels. Any of you who've traveled to Norway, you know about the tunnels. I took a lot of ferries to get across bodies of water. When possible, I included a hike. I'm very inspired by nature. And that's a really important piece of Norwegian culture too, is just spending time in nature. And then, of course, knitting. And next slide. And so I'm just going to take you on a journey and again provide a little sample of my trip and what I did and what I learned along the way. And just to know that when I first arrived in Oslo, I spent the first several days with friends. And these are friends of ours that we met through an exchange student that we had 12 years ago. We had an exchange student live with us for a year, Ireland, and we became quite friendly and close to his family. They've been here to Minnesota and Wisconsin, and then we've been over there to visit them. So it's a really nice relationship. Well, Ireland's mother, Berit, is an amazing knitter, amazing. She took the time to bring out a lot of her sweaters to show me what she likes to knit. And the picture you see here is Berit and her mother. So Berit learned to knit from her mother, and her mother's an amazing knitter as well. So it definitely is a practice that's connected to culture that's passed down in generations, and really fun to spend time with Berit, to knit with her, to hear about her learning, and spend a little time with her mother. And they live right next to a very beautiful set of woods, so we spent time hiking as well. That picture of Rumorgret was amazing, and her mother made that. It's one of my favorite dishes. And then we had several meals together with the family, so just really special. But if you see the next slide, you'll see images from some museums that I went to. So while in Oslo, I went to the Folk Museum, and they have a special exhibit on the history of Norwegian knitting. And that's really wonderful to visit and to see the sweaters that were collected, that were featured, certain publications that really capture the history of Norwegian knitting. And I just really enjoyed my time there. And then that picture toward the bottom of the red hats, that's from the Resistance Museum. And so I went there knowing that during World War II, in the resistance movement in Norway, one symbol of resistance against the Nazis were these red hats that were knit. And people that would wear them, it was a way to communicate, I'm a part of the resistance. Well, when the Nazis found out about that, actually, people began to get fined for wearing these red hats. But just really interesting to learn the role of knitting during World War II and in the resistance movement. There was also the Selbu mitten that had a symbol of, I guess it was an armor symbol on the mitten that also conveyed the resistance movement. So knitting can have some political messages as well. And then that other picture of mittens in the very corner, I was taking the train back and forth between the house of Berit and Petter to downtown Oslo, and I just loved capturing everyday mittens that people were wearing. And so I just thought those were so unique. So I did that a lot, taking pictures now and then, asking for permission, of course. And then I went to the Munch Museum, and I went to knitting stores. It was really, I wanted to immerse myself in color, in art, and in imagery from the countryside. Went to the National Museum as well. So just really appreciate having that time in Oslo to get kind of grounded in the culture and in art before launching on my trip. And next slide. So one of the first stops, I did go through Porsgrunn and spent a night with a friend there, and then went on to Ristad because I knew I wanted to spend a couple days at in Setesdal at the Setesdal Museum is an exhibit of Anamor Sundbu, and she's considered the queen of knitting in Norway. Um, she's published many, many books, and so I've picked up a few of her books and am reading and learning so much from Anamor. I had wanted to interview her, but she had some health challenges, so I wasn't able to do that. But it was fine. I spent a couple days at this exhibit, and it's an incredible. And so Anamor's story is when she was in her early 20s, she had it in mind to create a tweed fabric and to recycle sweaters that she would collect from all over the country, to repurpose these sweaters and mittens and hats and turn them into fabric to create tweed. So as she was creating and collecting, she called them rag piles. She began to sort of consider, like, oh my gosh, this is such a rich and important part of Norwegian history. All these motifs from all over Norway. And she started interviewing the elders in Norwegian communities to understand better, how did you learn to knit? What did you wear? To better understand the history. And so it centered down this trajectory. And she chose to then create a exhibit, essentially, that the Setesdal Museum has on display of her items that she had collected. It's the story of her factory, and it's the story of these motifs from various parts of Norway. So it just really, really interesting. You get to see like historical articles, old photos, and some of the learnings that she learned as she interviewed various older adults in Norway. But they call her the sweater detective because she goes so deep in understanding Norwegian knitting. So in the museum itself, and you can go to the next slide. Okay, so take a look at that. It's just incredible to be able to go to this museum. And I have a video clip, and we'll try to share that in just a moment, but just to give you some background. So, hanging on the walls of this museum are multiple worn versions of famous sweater motifs, including the Setesdal sweater, which is probably one of the most recognized design. And it's really a museum in which you can engage with the material. So it's not a museum where you can't touch things, you can't take them off. So if you see the bottom middle picture, those are little cubbies. You can actually take the sweaters out, and they had a table, and you could spread it out and you could take a look at it. You can handle it. So I really appreciate it as a knitter to be able to handle these items and to look at the motifs, take pictures of them, try to understand how they were put together. And many of these were so well loved. They had holes in them. They were worn thin. And it just really, as I was going through, it's like, wow, the utility. So as a knitter, sometimes I see knitted items and I think, oh, it's so beautiful, it's so wonderful to wear this. It's almost like wearing a piece of art. Well, in Norway, it goes beyond that. It's very practical, right? It's practical for the weather. It's practical for the time they spend outside. And then the cultural aspect of it just adds this whole other element and importance to that. So Anamor Sundbu is incredible. She's, again, an author of many books. I encourage you to take a look at those. And she teaches and lectures around the world. So just an incredible story herself, and just promoting the learning of the folk art of Norwegian knitting. And the next slide, I think, just has some more imagery from the museum. And you can see the bottom left-hand corner, that is the Setesdal sweater. That is a quintessential. So it's marked by the distinctive lease pattern of white dots. You see the white dots against the dark background, that real contrast. You see the neckline is framed in colorful embroidery, and oftentimes it's secured with a silver clasp. So it's really a beautiful design. It became very popular, I believe, in the 1994, especially when the Olympics were held in Norway. So just another thing I learned is just how important like the ski culture and how popular Norwegian sweaters are among skiers, among both alpine and cross-country skiers. If you go to any alpine area, literally around the world, it is not surprising to see somebody wearing a Norwegian sweater. So it's really just amazing how popular the Norwegian sweaters are, especially patterns like that. That and the Maree sweater are two very popular ones. And then I couldn't help but take pictures of the place I stayed in the bottom right-hand corner. Beautiful view, of course, but there were many knitted items around that little cabin. There were knitted pillows, and there was a knitted container that had the matches for the fireplace. And like, so whoever owns that place is definitely a knitter, which is fun to see, kind of the more practical elements of knitting. And Maddie, I don't know if we're able to share that video. I took a video just to kind of walk around the museum, and it might be on the next slide. Um, yeah, here it is. So I just wanted to provide an opportunity. I walked around, tried to be as quiet as I could so you could see what I experienced in the museum. And I'll just be quiet for a minute or two. This is the incredible wall of mittens and gloves. And again, these are all items that Anamor Sunbu collected as she traveled throughout the country. Okay, thank you, Maddie. I'm glad that worked out. Um, I just want to shout out to Anamor Sunbu for just the amazing writing, books, just how inspiring it is to learn, and also to have the opportunity to go to this museum. Now, sadly, as I was leaving the museum, I was chatting with the folks there, and they informed me that they were taking this exhibit down. And I don't know if that's happened yet. So this was last fall that I traveled there, but hopefully there'll be another place for this exhibit to another place to house this exhibit so that if you travel over there, you have the opportunity to see these items. Next slide. So then I made it over, headed west, and I just had time, 2 nights, to spend near the Bakken farm, which the Bakken farm is named after my grandma's second cousin, Johannes Bakken. It was his farm and area. And before he passed away, he gave his farm to the community, and it ended up being passed on to the Norwegian Hut Association. So if any of you are hikers and you like to hike to huts to spend the night, this is an example in Norway that you can get on the DNT, that's the name of the Hut Association. You can book a night at various cabins throughout the country. And so my grandma's second cousin's house that he lived in is now one of those huts. So it's pretty remarkable to know that like we can continue to visit Bakken and stay there as a guest through the DNT. I had been to Bakken a couple of times with my mom before it was turned over to the DNT, and the person that you see in the first picture here is my distant cousin. I'll just say cousin. I don't like saying distant, but we're related distantly. That's Narva. And he was excited to know that I was coming, and he arranged to go to his father's hytta cabin, which is further up the mountain from Bakken. So you cannot drive to Bakken. It's only accessible through hiking. It's about an hour and a half from the fjord. And then from the Bakken farm, you hike up another hour and maybe 10, 20 minutes to a Narva's family's cabin called Kvevabu. Narva's father, Barent, got to know Johannes very, very well and had so many stories about him. And so there's a really special connection with in our family. And Barent has passed away, and now Narva he is the storyteller. He is the holder of those family stories. And on the next slide, you'll see pictures of Johannes that I took from a book about the farm. And so look at his beautiful sweater. And the picture of the woman spinning is Gertrude. That's his sister. And so it's just very special to me to know that knitting and spinning is a part of my family history. And so I just felt a really special connection, spending time at Bakken and then spending time at Narva's family cabin. And so the next slide will show images of my time up at Narva's father's cabin called Kvevabu. And look at the view. It's incredible. For any of you who have been to Norway, maybe you went to Preikestolen, Pulpit Rock. That's just down the fjord from this property here, from this cabin. You can hike actually from Bakken to Preikestolen. So it's that same body of water outside of Stavanger, and it's just absolutely stunning. The picture on the right-hand side, you see the Norwegian flag, which Narva put up as soon as we got there. And I am at the base of that, and I'm reading my family history. It makes me a little emotional, sorry. I wasn't expecting that. So, yeah, just a very special place for our whole family. And while I was there, I just heard a lot more stories from Narva about the family. So it's just super unique experience, and really appreciated having the opportunity to knit there too. Next slide, please. So not far from the Bakken farm is Stavanger, and in Stavanger is the Sandnes yarn factory. So I arranged for a tour of the factory, and I had such a wonderful time. And had my tour guide here who led me through the factory, which is huge. It's a very large factory. They had expanded not too long ago to accommodate their yarn production, but it's the largest producer of hand knitting yarn in Northern Europe. And it's one of the oldest factories in Norway that is still running. So Sandnes prides itself on receiving wool from farmers in Norway that have sheep. So the wool arrives at Sandnes and from all their suppliers, and they wash it, right? They clean it, and after they wash it, the wool goes to be carded, and they have machines for that to get it ready for spinning. And then the yarn is placed on these cones. And then from the cones, they're transferred to skeins. There's also a dye kitchen where they're deciding on the colors and what chemicals they're going to use to mix up for the colors. And they study trends and fashion. They have a separate room for that. It was really fascinating to see all these vials of colors. And they are very focused on eco-friendly products too. So as they're using different dyes. But after the dyeing, the excess water is squeezed out through these rollers, and then they use robots to pick up the skeins for the air dryer. And then the skeins are fed into automatic balling machines. And what they do is they want to make sure that a skein of yarn that says it's 50 grams or 25 grams truly is the weight that it says. So they will periodically pull these skeins off, and they will weigh them to make sure. And they're usually never going below what it says, and sometimes going a little bit above. So the next a couple of images. You can hit the next slide, please. Are just images of this process. So yes, they have robots, but they also have individuals working at this factory. And it was really just fascinating for me to see all of the wool that's there and the washing machines and the dyes, and just to get a sense of before I go buy or when I go buy my skeins of yarn at Ingebrigtsen's in Minneapolis, I'm like, I can look at this skein now and know a little bit about the journey if it's Sandnes yarn, which is really fun for me. It's labeled, it's bagged, and it's shipped from Sandnes. And then I think there's one more slide, Maddie. Yeah. So here's an example. He just pulled a skein off for me and he showed how it's weighed. And you can see this is a little bit above 50 grams. They also have a wonderful shop there with all of their different lines of yarn with various weights and thicknesses. They have special relationships with certain designers and even with some athletes that are knitters that have designed their own items. So I took this picture because this designer of petite knit, she's actually from Denmark, but her patterns are very, very popular in Norway. Like I saw a lot as I traveled around. Of course, I'm looking, and I saw a lot of people wearing the petite knit sweaters, lightweight vests, various things. And so this has inspired me to teach a class for Vesterheim, which is in December. So if you're interested in learning how to knit the Sophie scarf, that's the top right here. I will be teaching a class that's on 2 consecutive Wednesdays in the first 2 weeks of December. So please join me if you're interested in that class. And what I have to say about the Sophie scarf is I was knitting one as I traveled, and I had so many people come up to me, oh, that's the Sophie scarf. I've knit half a dozen of those. And like it was like a conversation starter. So that was really fun. And then the bottom right-hand corner, that's their break room in the Sandnes factory. And that poster is of biathlete, a Norwegian skier, extremely well-known biathlete skier. She's retired now, but her name is Tiril Eckhoff, and she's a designer. So she's a skier, and she became a designer, and she has her own line of patterns. So I just thought that was fun to see that image of her. I'm a skier, so I knew of her, and it was fun for me to see that in the factory. Next slide. And so this is Åshild. This is the woman who taught me how to knit, my relative, and she lives in Stavanger, and she pulled out all her sweaters, which you see in the picture there. And we had such a nice time together. We knitted together. She's showing a sweater she's knitting there. It was either for her son or her husband. And then some other family members, Ola Christian and his daughter Amalie, that I got to see. And then the hand-dyed wool is there on the couch. So just such a nice time there. Next slide. Then I went on to Uda, which is where my paternal side of my family comes from, and got to spend several days there. And did some hiking that was quite challenging. You can see the ropes and the ladders there to the right. And then spent quite a bit of time with Turin, who is the niece of Olaf, who you saw on that first slide. And just, she's an avid knitter. She knits every day. We had so much fun talking about knitting together, just sharing our love of knitting. And that farm there, that's the family farm. So that's the Monsaker farm. That I've been to several times, was there for the 300th anniversary of the farm, along with lots of my aunts, my uncle, my cousins, and that was in 2010, I believe. Next slide. And so here's Turin, and she knits these blankets for her children when they turn 50. And that's her and my mom. They were quite close, had a very special relationship. So I just had to add that photo as well. And so these are the photo of the basket. That's Torun's stash of knitting. Those are socks she knit and gave to me, which were so lovely. And then I went to the local bookstore and I wanted to see what books were for sale that were related to knitting. So that was fun. And this sweater, I believe, is her niece. No, her granddaughter is knitting that a sweater and had been asking her for some help. So that was pretty special to spend time with Torun. The next slide. And I'm going to go through these next few slides kind of quickly because I want to get to the Bergen Knit Fest. So just quickly, I worked on a farm. I got to see Lars Blya, who I lived with many years ago. That's his daughter, Hjördis Ingeborg, who's a knitter. And that was just so special. It's an active farm, and Hjördis Ingeborg's brother, Lars's son, Olaf, has turned it into a cider farm, and his cider is known around the world. It's actually won many, many awards. So just really cool to see that. And I took pictures of the cider there. The picture of me hiking, that was from 2010. And I wanted to put this in here because one of my main learnings about Norwegian knitting is just the utility of knitting and how closely tied it is to the out of doors. Nature inspires the colors. When you go out and you go for a hike and it's kind of misty or rainy even, if you have felted wool mittens on, it protects you from the elements. So like just wool coming from nature, using wool for items that you wear in nature is just so quintessentially Norwegian. Next slide. And these are sheep from the Mansacker farm, from my family farm, and just a picture of family members before I left, and then a picture of my mom. Again, very special connection to this area. Next slide. Now on to Bergen. I had an incredible opportunity to spend several days in Bergen and to attend a knitting festival. And this knitting festival happens every year. It's 2 full days. It's held in an old factory, yarn factory. And it's basically, they have about 5 to 6 presenters each day. So the presenters have their slide decks. They talk about their passion around knitting. Most of the presenters have books that have just been published about knitting. And while attendees are listening, everyone's knitting. And then they have a whole floor of vendors that bring their wool, their skeins, their knitting accessories to the festival. And so when you have breaks, then we could go and check out the vendors. Of course, they had a cafe because there was time for coffee and baked goods, which were wonderful. It was very well organized, and I learned so much. I have a few slides that feature some of the speakers, and I'll just share a little bit about them. And happy to share more. If you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to share more about each of these knitters who presented. But here's some examples of vendors, showing, and designers showing their sweaters. And next slide. Now I'm just going to identify four of the basically 12 speakers, just highlighting 4 of them. And I think when I walked away from that festival, I was so inspired, not only by just the color and the yarn that was available, and the imagery that I saw in these slides, but what inspired me, honestly, the most were the young people presenting. Not all of them were young people, but many of the presenters were young people. And when I say young people, 23, 24, 25-year-olds who've published books about knitting and who are taking knitting in maybe a nuanced different direction, and I'll share what that looks like. So this young woman, she has a line of patterns, and she has several books she's published. She combines the aspect of being outdoors and how good nature is for mental health and mental well-being, because she's had her own struggles with anxiety and depression, and she found nature in her mid-20s, and she's embraced it as a way to deal with mental health, as well as knitting. She finds knitting to be very meditative, and she knits with these incredible colors. You can see on this slide just how like these colors pop, and they're not necessarily traditional colors, but she has elements of traditional Norwegian motifs in her pattern. So just really wonderful. I'm hoping this book that she published, she said after, she presented, I chatted with her for a little bit. She said it's coming out in English, which would be wonderful. And so just really wanted to feature her. Her name is Una Cecilia. Next slide. Here's another designer. She's 23, and her emphasis and her book is all about trying to use up your stash of yarn. So as she started her talk, she said to everyone in the audience, how many of you, and she said this in Norwegian, I could kind of pick up what she was saying, how many of you have big stashes of yarn in your homes? And I'm like, probably 90% of us raised our hands and kind of laughed and kind of giggled, because it's kind of like, yeah, I have a lot of yarn. Her emphasis in her book is all about using what we have, not to buy new yarn. Use what we have, rather than buying everything new. And her book is featuring patterns that you can do by using the yarn that you have on hand. So she has information about what colors go well together, and how different yarn qualities, how you can group those together. So she has just really creative ways, and her patterns feature sweaters, jackets, tops, bags, purses. And again, it's a way to use up the yarn that you already have. She calls it crafting green, and being environmentally smart about your knitting. So really fun. She's very active on TikTok and has, just fun tips that you can learn about on those on her TikTok channel and on Instagram. So yeah, she's all about zero waste, and she's created beautiful sweaters. She has some on display. Next slide. Now this Anna Bjork, she presented her book that was just published. She is not a designer herself. She created this book to feature 10 designers around the world, actually, some from Norway and some from other countries. And I guess there's 21 new designs in her book. And some are simple and classic, and other are more challenging. And you'll see in this book the history of the Norlander knitwear, which is machine knitting. It's taking those patterns and creating hand knit patterns. So it's patterns that are inspired by traditional motifs around the world, some of which are Norwegian. And it was really fun because it was like a fashion show. So you can see in these images, there's a shawl that was modeled. There was a sweater, a vest, and just really, really beautiful, exquisite pieces. So, and she is looking for an English publisher. So I told her I would put that word out for an English publisher for her book that's in Norwegian right now. Next slide. And this is just, you'll see that picture of the shop that was there at the factory where the festival was held. And then there's some images from a woman by the name of Pernilla Volent. She's the CEO, or she's the one that started this Oslo micro spinnery. And if you go to the next slide, I think might be another set of pictures. Oh, I'm sorry. If you could go back, Maddie, I'm sorry about that. So just wanted to say a little bit about the Oslo Micro Spinnery. It's a small local yarn spinning mill that focuses on locally sourced wool, which is refined into a unique, exclusive quality through craftsmanship and a love for raw material. So she wanted to make a luxurious yarn available using Norwegian wool and just really phenomenal colors and locally sourced. So another, I would say, big theme from the festival was the importance of locally sourced yarn. That's like Norwegian wool. Very proud of Norwegian wool, and we are using local wool. We're not relying on wool from other that has traveled many, many miles and is not good for the environment. So there's environmental aspect. And the other piece I learned too is that with the environment too, that apparently washable wool has some microplastics that are added to it that are not good for the environment. So there's a big, a big emphasis on just natural Norwegian wool and not seeking out the washable wool, which I didn't know about that. So that was some learning. Next slide. And we're almost done here because I want to allow some time for questions. The last place that I visited in terms of museums was the Selbu Mitten Museum, which was just incredible. And I had heard about this little museum. The town itself only has 4,000 residents. It's a small town. And it's in South Trøndelag, so it's about an hour, maybe 10 minutes south and east of Trondheim. The Selbu story is about a young girl who was about 16 years old, Marit, that she wanted to make something with both the black and white wool from their sheep, and she knit a pair of mittens and wore them to church. And it created this craze for everyone wanted these Selbu mittens. And in the 1920s, so this was like late 1800s, early 1900s, in the 1920s, people of Selbu began knitting thousands of these mittens and sending them all over the world. So it provided a way for women in particular to earn their own money. And then I mentioned earlier about the World War II that wearing the Selbu mitten was a sign of resistance. But there's certain qualities of Selbu mittens that you have to abide by. So there's one pattern on the outside. You see the Selbu rose there. And then on the other side, the flip side, is a more simple pattern. And then there's this pole that goes around the edge. It's called stolpe, around the outside of the mitten. And then men's mittens, they have a traditional sort of pattern on the cuff, and women typically have stripes on the cuff. And I taught a Selbu mitten class last year, really enjoyed that through Vesterheim. I love knitting these mittens. They're very warm. Just the other thing too is that a lot of ski events that happen in Norway, either cross country or alpine, or like you see these mittens everywhere. People are wearing these mittens and really proud of the connection to Norway. So there's a massive collection at this museum. There's the largest Selbu mitten you can see in the Guinness Book of World Records. I'm standing in front of that. That's kind of fun to see. They have a beautiful little shop there that sells locally sourced wool, and that just a lot of history there that you can learn about as you go through the museum. And just outside the museum is a ski museum, so I thought that was interesting too. I didn't know that that was there, just a small little cross-country ski museum. Next slide. And these are just images. And I thought it was interesting too that in the like 1920s and 30s, it wasn't just the women knitting, it was the men too, because they saw it as a source of income. That town had been known for mining, and the mining millstones had declined, and so this was a really great economic boom for the town, these Selbu mittens. Next slide. And then I'm just wrapping up here. I know it's almost time to wrap it up here. My final stop was at a hytta, and it was our friend Barrett's brother, Shell, his wife, Christian, had me there for a couple of days to knit. And so it was so fun just to sit around and knit. And that's Leva, that's Barrett's daughter, who's holding up that sweater there. The blue and white sweater is the World Championship sweater. And the World Championships were held in Norway this year for cross-country skiing, so that was a big deal. So she was knitting that sweater for her son and another one for his girlfriend. That's Barrett and I, just those felted wool mitts are so incredibly warm. When you go on hikes and it's windy and and sometimes if it rains or snows, that's like the best element to have, or it's best mitten to wear against the elements, and just such a gorgeous area. I was so excited to be there in the fall because I really loved the colors that I saw there. Next slide. So my takeaways, one, just that knitting tradition is really, really strong in Norway still. Lots of young people knitting well. It ebbs and flows over the years. The interest in it, it's very high right now. Secondly, there's a big focus on Norwegian wool, sourcing locally, and paying attention to the environment as you purchase your wool and use your wool. And then the third is just how closely tied it is to people who like to be outdoors and in nature. Just like you knit a sweater and you wear it and you use it to help you keep you warm, but also it's tied to your culture and your history. Next slide. And these are just 3 projects that were inspired by this trip. I bought a book with Sami patterns written by a Sami woman, and I'm translating it and then knitting this sweater. That's a petite knit vest and Selbu mittens. Next slide. And I'm teaching, I mentioned already, a Sophie scarf class in early December for Vesterheim. Next slide. Inspired by my grandma. She took a trip there in 1967, and I actually took her notes on her trip with me and read them. And then my Aunt Ruth told me that she had yarn and needles from my great-grandmother. So that's that image in the top right. And then down below is Narva's father, Bergen, who really opened up and shared so many stories about Johannes. And that was my grandma's second cousin, and he's there with my mom. Next slide. Just an image from all the photos I took, and I have many more. Next slide. When I see these images, I just continue to be inspired, and I'm going to create an Instagram account, Maree Knits, and I'm going to feature imagery from that trip over the next several months. Next slide. And just a hearty thanks to Vesterheim for the opportunity for this study in Norway. The next slide. And just all the folks that I stayed with, I want to thank them. The next slide. And the people I met along the way, just really appreciated how friendly people were in shops and husflidens, and it's fun to just meet with knitters along my journey. Next slide. And just end with a quote. So knitted sweaters in our time are a national treasure of Norway, and our sweater heritage is an adventuresome source for the power of creation and knitting happiness. That's Anna Morsenbu from this book, Norway's Knitted Heritage. And that's it. And I'm sorry, we have just a few minutes, but I'm happy to hang on if anyone else wants to hang on for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. That was just a wonderful presentation. I feel so inspired after seeing all that. So thank you so much.
Good. I'm glad.
We do have a few questions. Can you remind us what the name of the 3-day knitting conference was?
Berga Strikkfest.
Wonderful.
Yes, and that happens in September.
And that's an annual thing?
It's annual. Yeah, yep. And I can share the link, Maddie, if there's any kind of follow-up. I can share the link for the festival. It's end of September every year. I just have my handout from it here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share that link out if you share it with me.
Sure.
Cool. And then I have a question. How do you feel that the Norwegian values have kind of affected the modern contemporary knitting scene in Norway? I know you talked a little bit about the recycling yarn and the inspiration of nature, but do you see it in like the designs and the patterns as well?
Yes. And so I did some interviews with Norwegian knitters, and one interview in particular, she just commented on just the popularity of knitting and all the young people that are getting into knitting. Um, and that there's a movement or there's like this interest in old patterns and actually going back to vintage patterns and knitting items. And just a real pride in those traditional patterns that's flowing into the contemporary scene of Norwegian knitting
Yeah.
by young people.
Yeah. Amazing. And then have you created the Instagram account yet, or is that something you're hoping to do
I
for like
haven't yet, but I have plans to. I have a whole folder of Instagram photos that are ready. And I'm super excited to do it. I will say that putting this seminar or this webinar together was such a joyful experience for me. It really meant a lot.
I mean, it was just a fabulous presentation, and I think
Thank
you've
you.
just learned so much and brought so much value back with you to share.
Yeah, and I'm doing another presentation similar for the Minnesota Knitters Guild. I'm teaching a mitten class locally in Minneapolis for the Lopet Foundation. I have the class at Vesterheim in early December. So anyway, I just would love to engage with any of the attendees at any of these events if it's possible for them. Just invite them to connect through you.
Yeah, absolutely. Two more questions here, and then we'll wrap it up. Um, I guess three more.
Okay.
Sorry. What were
It's
the
okay.
dates of the that you went and the dates of the festival?
Okay, so I went September 11th to October 9. The dates of the festival, I think it was like the 28th, 29th of September. Yeah, it's toward the end of September. And I know they just had it and it was more like the 25th, 26th.
Yeah, wonderful. Are there any other like knitting techniques that you've uncovered since being there that you haven't seen? Maybe more contemporary techniques.
That's a good question. So I want to, so this shirt is a t-shirt. It's very simple, but I was inspired and I knit this. It's not a new technique. In fact, it's quite simple. But I have really not knit in cotton before. It's like I've been knitting all these years, and for me, it's more of like a fall, winter, spring pursuit. So I will say I was inspired to knit in cotton and knit. Now I can knit year round.
Mhm.
That was a new inspiration for me. It's like, it's funny that I hadn't thought of it before, but these t-shirts are really popular. It's like, yeah, so it's fun to know that.